All righty. Good morning, everybody. Everybody had their coffee this morning? Stay dry. You picked the right place to be. Thank you for coming to my talk. My name is Andy Stewart. I'm here from Massachusetts, and I'm here to talk to you about something that I created called Andy's Ham Radio Linux. How many people have installed it and are already running it? I see a few of you. Thank you for doing that. How many people are here because you're interested in Linux and you're thinking about it? Okay, very good. How many of you people are here to stay dry and didn't care for any other talk? No, don't answer that. don't answer that. Okay, at least you're being honest. So thank you again for coming. I appreciate it. So just a little bit of information about me. I've been in the hobby since 2007. I got my technician license and then moved on from general to extra in 2009. I was the local ham radio club president for about 10 years. Our club is called PART, the Police Amateur Radio Team, since it was associated with the police department about 50 years ago. I did a little bit of work with the Eastern Massachusetts section for a few years, and I have founded and have been running a couple of Linux user groups in the area, one of which is still going, the one I founded in 1997 in Worcester, Massachusetts at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. That one's still going with about 25 very active members. I also did some instruction at the local adult education program in one town over, and I did that for about 6 or 7 years and had a lot of fun with that. I've been using Linux since 1997, and I very much enjoyed it. And by day, I'm a computer engineer. So I build computer simulations and test digital logic and try to break it before our customers ever get their hands on it. So my most recent interests, I've developed an interest in antique radios, 1920s, 1930s mostly. I electrically restore them. I like making them work again. I enjoy all manner of different homebrew projects, the kits that are out there and so forth. I built myself a 1920s regenerative receiver with some parts actually from that era, and it works. And I was pretty thrilled about that. I like to use FT8 and grid tracker and fox hunting, but there are many other aspects of the hobby I enjoy as well. And of course, I like to spend time creating Andy's Ham Radio Linux for those of you who want to download it and try it. And there is a new and related project that I will talk about in a little bit that I have not announced publicly yet. So what are the goals of Andy's Ham Radio Linux? The goal is to promote Linux. I'm very much a proponent of free and open source software, and I would like to do my part to get that into the hands of like-minded people, folks that just want to give it a try, for whatever reason they may have for wanting to give it a try. This is one way that I give back to the Linux and ham radio communities. A lot of people have Elmered us through the years and taught us things. Hopefully, we've had an opportunity to teach other people the things we have learned, and this is a way that I give back both to the Linux community and to the ham radio community. But I wanted to create a software collection that had as much free and open source ham radio software as possible. So I scoured the internet and put on there everything that I could put on there, nothing proprietary. Question, sir? Do I need to go closer to the mic? Okay, is that 5.9 plus? Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me know that. How's this? Is this good too? Okay, excellent. Let me do this. So I wanted to create a software collection that had as much free and open source software on it as possible. Of course, I don't have the skills or the time to write all of these pieces of software. Many folks have already done that. I just wanted to pull it all together in one place. And my goal is that everything just works. Now, with any computer, that's a lofty goal, I'll grant you. But we all have computers, cell phones, this, that, the other thing. We have to fuss with them to make them work. And I wanted a computer where people could focus on enjoying the ham radio hobby and not having yet another computer to babysit and make work. Only the user community can decide if I've accomplished that goal, but that's what I'm trying to do. And so back about 12 years ago or so, the idea of Andy's Ham Radio Linux started. So what is Andy's Ham Radio Linux? It's based on a flavor of Ubuntu Linux with the XFCE interface. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. There are many different user interfaces available on Linux, and I picked one. So Ubuntu has it, and they call it, well, some people say Xubuntu, other people say Xubuntu, but whatever you call it, that's what it is. And I didn't want to invent this from scratch. I wanted to build on the shoulders of giants. And so I took Xubuntu and I did what they call remastered it. So I started with that base, and I added all kinds of ham radio software to it. Some was compiled from source code, and others was from the Ubuntu repository on the internet. And I installed all of that. I created an ISO file which you can download and then install on your computer. And ideally, cross your fingers, make offerings to various deities, and it just works. So one way to get started would be to download the ISO file. It's on SourceForge, and I'll give you that link in a little bit. And you could use software like VirtualBox, which is quite literally running a computer within a computer. So you don't have to mess up your existing hard drive, not yet, if you don't want to. What many people do is they take a laptop that's 5 or 6 years old. Maybe they just bought a new one because that one is too old, too slow for something, and they try it there. And they find that even a laptop that's several years old serves the purpose just fine. Most of the ham radio applications are not compute intensive. Software-defined radio is a notable exception, but you'll find a machine that's a few years older will often work just fine. So we'll go through some of the process. You create a bootable USB thumb drive, you install it on your hard drive when you want to, and the document that describes all of this is online, and it's called Getting Started, and I encourage you to read it and follow it. Anything that you will need is in there for you. So the target computer, any 64-bit machine that's 10 years older or less will probably work. You need to have a minimum of 4 gigabytes of memory. More is better. At least 20 gigabytes of disk space is needed. These days, that's no big deal. And the processor speed is not really an issue, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Networking, all computers these days have wired and wireless, so that's fine. And USB is required for the installation, which again, these days everybody's got that. So when you put all this stuff on your thumb drive in the way described in that document, and you boot the thumb drive, you will come up with a screen that looks very much like this. And what you'll notice is you've got a background, which is totally customizable. You've got some icons on the left-hand side of the screen, and then a taskbar along the bottom with various colored icons. All of that is completely and totally customizable by you, so you can make it be any way you want. And what you'll notice is the third icon down on the left says Install Xubuntu. So you can play with it in this mode. This is what they call a live installation. And it's fully functional, but it's a little bit slower because you're running off the USB thumb drive. And afterwards, if you decide that you like it, you can either click or double-click that icon, and it will do the installation, whether you have a hard drive, SD card, whatever you might have for storage. It'll do the installation there, and after a few minutes, you reboot it, and you'll be up and running. Now, I want to really encourage you to read the Getting Started document. There's one little small issue with the install. There's a quick procedure that you do exactly one time to fix it, and then after that, you never have to do it again. And it's actually surprising to me how many people don't read this document. It's only a page or two long, and I get a lot of questions about this issue. Why can't I log in? Because you didn't read the document. So please, I encourage you to read the document, and then you can avoid that problem entirely. And honestly, if I knew how to fix it, I would, so you wouldn't even have that little tiny hassle. So when you do everything correctly, you'll get a login screen that looks like this. Now, you'll note that there's one thing you didn't do correctly, because notice the default login name says Other. That's because that one little step you didn't quite follow correctly. But you can fix it by running this little script that I have in there, and by logging in with the default user, which is Xubuntu. And once you do that and fix it, you can get whatever username you want in there. By the way, if anybody sends me an email, I'll be happy to share the slides with you, and all of this is available. So once you run the fix account script and get everything all set up, if your username was Andy, it would look like this. You would type your password, and in you go. So what I've done here is I have done some customization of the menu so that you would be able to find all of the programs that are installed there, because otherwise, how would you know what I've put in there? And so what you'll see is on the right-hand side of that menu, the highlighted part says Andy Ham Radio Linux. And Ubuntu has their own organization of all of these programs, and you'll see on the down the bottom there where it says development, education, electronics, and so forth. That's Ubuntu's way of organizing these things. And I didn't want to mess with it because it would just get undone anyway the next time you upgrade something. So I created a whole new menu called Andy Ham Radio Linux, and I organized things that the way it made sense to me. And that's what you see on the left-hand side. So you'll see where it says antenna and CW and digital modes and so forth. Now, I can't possibly go through every program that's in there. There's about 50 or 60 of them, but I'll just do a real high-level explanation of what's in there so that you'll have an idea. So as I mentioned, the backgrounds are customizable, and I found some images out there that are not encumbered by a copyright or anything of that nature, so you can customize the background to your heart's content. I even put some documentation out there. If you're having trouble with a particular program, I would encourage you to go to the website for that program and get the most up-to-date information. But I have some documentation online here for you tied to the menus so that you can get at it. The overwhelming majority of the programs are graphically based, but there are a few that are command line based, and the documentation for those is available. Now, for people who are familiar with Linux, there's a man page in there, but for those of you who aren't, I've tied it to the menu, so you don't have to know that detail just yet. Okay, so AHRL, Andy's Ham Radio Linux. I put a link in there for the documentation. So when you click this, it'll automatically bring up the Firefox browser, and it will show you some documents that I've created. And they're, how to this and how to that. It's just based on my experience how to get certain things working. So, for example, somebody who wants to play with the WeatherFax satellites and so forth, there's some information in there how to do it. Or Digital Radio Mondial is another one. And there are several others that are available. Some of these you might never have heard of, and this might be a chance to jump in and see what those are all about. So at a high level, I'm just going to go through the menus here. And so you'll see off on the left-hand side, there's a few programs related to antennas. There's some programs related to CW, digital modes, and so forth. And I'm just going to do a real high-level walkthrough. I'm not going to touch every item, but I want to give you a feel for what's in there. So of all of the software that's in this collection, probably about 3 or 4 programs were actually written by me, and the rest are things that are out there on the internet. And for those of you who like to build your own antennas, this is a program that I wrote several years ago so that you can construct a Moxon rectangle antenna. Now, it looks an awful lot like a very similar Windows program, but this is a complete rewrite and is free and open source software. It's very simple. You type in the frequency of interest in your wire gauge, and it will tell you the dimensions, and it will also output a file that you can use in your antenna modeling software, and it'll output a PDF file so you can print it and go to your garage and build one. And here's a quick screenshot of the antenna modeling software. You can see that the Moxon rectangle is vertically polarized, and it was designed for the 2-meter band. And you can see some charts that talk about front-to-back gain and certain other things like that, the SWR, the radiation pattern, and so forth. And this piece of software is available. It's very powerful, and I've made it easier for you to start because the other program wrote the file for it. So another activity that many hams are interested in is CW, and for those people who are new to CW and would like to get started, there's a program that will issue random characters, 5 characters per group, and you write down on a piece of paper what you think you heard, and you come back later and compare it to the screen here and see if you got it right. There's other ways to do that. One website that I like is called lcwo.net. That's Lima Charlie Whiskey Oscar.net. Learn CW online. And that's another good resource for those of you who might choose to learn CW. How many people out here already know CW? Quite a few of you. How many people are interested in learning? A few. Okay, this is one possible way you might do that. Another program that's in there that I wrote with the help of Bionics is a program that interfaces to their Microfox device. About 10 years ago, I saw this device and I contacted Bionics and I said, hey guys, you have a cool device, but there's no software for Linux. It's only for Windows. I said, would you be kind enough to tell me your interface so I could write a program for it? And very surprisingly, they said yes. And they posted it on their internet website. So Bionics, thank you. 10 years later, I'm still thanking them for this. And I wrote this program so that you can use their Microfox device on Linux. They already supply software for Windows, so that audience is all set. But this would just configure the characteristics of what gets transmitted on a periodic basis by the Fox device. Okay, the next menu is digital modes, and you'll notice there's an awful lot of them in there. How many people are familiar with FLDigi? Okay, many. That program runs on all three major operating systems. How many people are familiar with FreeDV, the free digital voice? A few people, okay. And how about the M17 project? A few, okay. I've got some software in here for all of those and many, many more. So this is a program that should be familiar, WSJTX, for running FT8. How many people play around with FT8? Quite a few, okay. This program shouldn't look any different to you. You've got the waterfall at the bottom, the decode of the transmissions in the upper windows, and you click on it, and your computer talks to their computer, you make a QSO, and it logs it automatically for you. Okay, this is a most excellent piece of software. How many people are familiar with Grid Tracker? Quite a few. I'm happy to see that. So for people who are interested in watching grids in particular, it doesn't just have to be for Fred Fish on 6 meters, but this will tie into WSJTX quite nicely. And it draws really gorgeous maps of all of the grids that you have contacted, that you have QSL'd, grids that are on the air. It's a live map, and it's a really, really excellent stuff. And Stephen Loomis and company have done a great job writing and supporting this. And it will talk to Xlog, which is a simple logging program that I am now the maintainer of, but I didn't write it originally. Xlog's been around probably about 20 years, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. So this picture, if it's up there, doesn't entirely do the software justice, but you can see the really nice map, and there are many, many different maps from which to choose. You can see the colored rectangles that indicate who's on the air, have you chatted with that grid before, and so on and so forth, as well as the day-night line. There are many, many customizations you can do to this as far as filtering. So you might say, I only want to see stations calling CQ that are grids that I do not yet have. For example, you can slice it and dice it any way you want. It's really a very nice software to use. I recommend that you have a large monitor somewhere handy to really do it justice. A small laptop screen, it just won't do it. Okay, the next one down is electronic design. So there are a lot of people in this hobby who like to design circuits, they design kits and other such things. They might want to model such circuits in something like SPICE. And for that segment of the hobby, there's a whole bunch of software available for you. So how many people here are familiar with Arduinos? Quite a few. Okay, so I've put the Arduino IDE in here for you. I don't think it looks any different than on any other operating system. The MicroBitX family of radios from India, how many people are familiar with those? A few. Okay, inside the MicroBitX is an Arduino, and there's a few different pieces of Arduino software available on the internet to customize your MicroBitX radio any way you want. But this is the standard graphical interface for that, and many people use this as a way to start with computer programming because you can hook whatever circuit you want to this thing and control it, and it can be a lot of fun for those who are into it. So when I was building my replica 1920s regen receiver, I needed to wind a couple of coils. And I wasn't quite sure how many turns to put on the form to get the desired inductance. And I found this program out there called Coil 64, which will make those predictions for you depending on how you're going to wire your coil. And so I used this, and it got me in the ballpark. I put a few extra turns on just in case, because it's easier to take them off than to put them on, and was able to get a coil that would resonate nicely with my variable capacitor, and got a circuit that worked. So I don't know what this schematic represents, but for those of you who are drawing schematics, maybe you're creating a kit, you're creating your own circuit board or something like that, this KiCad software is completely fully featured. I don't think I've drawn a schematic in a couple of decades, but the software is available, so I put it in here for you. And hopefully, if you're into that aspect of the hobby, it will be useful to you. Okay, HF propagation, that's something that should be of interest to all of us, and there's quite a few programs on here that will assist with that. So this top display is a GIF file that the gentleman puts out there, and you've probably seen that on many, many different websites. It lets you know in brief what's going on with solar activity, how good the bands are going to be by some measure, and so forth. And I spoke to the gentleman who creates this, and he said it was okay to put a link in here so that people can get a hold of that information quickly. Now, the screen does not update dynamically. It's a snapshot, but it can be very handy to let you know what's going on in the bands. The lower program called QGrid is a quick program that will allow you to type in a couple of grids and figure out what direction to aim your antenna if you have such an antenna, and that kind of information can be quite handy. Now, this one here isn't a Linux-specific program, although it used to be. This is a website called VOA Cap. How many people have used it? Quite a few. I find this website very, very helpful, and all you have to do on the map on the left is click where you are, click where you'd like to talk to somebody, and if you put in some information about your power level, your antenna, your mode, and so forth, you'll get a display that looks very much like the one on the left, which will tell you at certain times of day and on certain bands, here's the probability that your QSO will go through. Now, it is just a probability. It's based on prediction. It doesn't know anything about recent solar flares and CMEs that have blacked a lot of things out. But if you follow this, in general, you'll improve the likelihood of communicating from point A to point B. So earlier, I mentioned some logging software called Xlog. This software has been around for at least 15 years, probably more like 20. It was written by a gentleman in Europe many, many years ago. And how long have I been doing it? 10 years maybe on this software? And the gentleman put out a post on the internet, and he says, I don't want to write this software anymore. I don't want to let the bits rot. So who would like to take it over? Send me an email with your credentials. So I had been using it. I sent him an email. Didn't hear anything for 4 or 5 weeks. I figured, oh, he found somebody else. Well, then he sends me an email, and he says, Andy, thank you for writing. Yes, you have the credentials. Yes, you can have it. And nobody else asked. So I was very happy to take ownership, but not full credit. And really the only updates that I've had to put in it is updates to the ADIF specification so that the files that this outputs would be accepted by all kinds of other programs on the internet. It's a very simple bare bones logger, but if you know the control key sequences, you can use it for something like field day. I have for many years. It outputs to a flat text file, so if you make a mistake, your favorite editor can fix it. And it just has your basic QSO information. It doesn't go out to the internet and fill in the blanks or anything like that. So if you want that feature, you'll want a different piece of software. But for casual logging, it works very well. But I have used it. So several times I've operated as Kilo 2 Hotel for 13 colonies out of Massachusetts. And I've put over 2,000 contacts in this log in a week. So if you know the shortcuts, you can do it. But it wasn't quite intended for that purpose. This is the program you would want for that, is CQR log. It uses a database as the back end. It talks to the internet, fills in the blanks for you, does all that kind of stuff. Now, I can't compare it to what might be equivalent Windows software. I often hear the name N1MM. I've never run that software, so I don't know its capabilities. But if you're going to explore the Linux world and you're into Serious DX, you might want to check out this logger. Possibly it'll do the trick for you. So the next menu down is, what do we have here? Oh, NBEAMS. So let's see, I always forget what that acronym stands for. Narrowband Emergency Messaging System. So some people out there may be familiar with WinLink. And the name WinLink by itself is exclusive to the Windows community. So folks that run Linux can't really play in that space. I find that unfortunate, but the narrowband emergency messaging system exists, and there are EMCOM organizations across the country that are using it. It's an open source software suite. As far as I know, it runs on all 3 major operating systems, and it requires no existing infrastructure to work, unlike WinLink, which requires certain servers to be up and running in order to function. I've also tied it in with an email program, so simple text emails can be sent back and forth. And this is an alternative for folks who might like to see something other than WinLink. So there's also a few rig control programs on here, which would come in handy from time to time. For folks who have newer ICOM radios, who has like a 7610 or a 7300, both excellent radios, this program might be something for you to consider. It's called WFView, and it doesn't show every capability of the radio. I don't think any rig control program does, but it shows an awful lot of different things that are commonly available. I don't know if you could use this in a remote radio situation. Possibly you could, but it's available for you. You can do the standard things like change volume, change frequency, band mode, and so forth, as well as the waterfall. So it might be something to consider for those of you who have more recent ICOM radios. The gentleman asked, how far back does that go on ICOM radios? And honestly, I don't know, but if I honestly don't know how far back that goes, but I'm sure at their website they would have a list of supported radios, and I would recommend checking that. I don't want to speak out of turn. Sure. Okay, satellites. How many people have ever played with or are currently playing with amateur radio satellites? A few people. Do you find your life revolves around the satellite? No pun intended. It does. Many years ago, I built one of those Kent Britain cheap Yagis for a satellite, and I was living in Chelmsford, Massachusetts at the time. I got it built. It was a very cold, snowy January day in my driveway when I aimed it up to the sky and made my first satellite contact with a guy in Nashua, New Hampshire, which was about 10 miles north. Now, he had a beautiful QSL card, which I still have, but I went to a lot of trouble to get that. But it was a lot of fun. I don't do too much satellite now because I live the next town over, and I have too many trees on my property, which is great for hanging antennas, but not so great when you want to see the sky and do satellite contacts. But this is a program that AMSAT puts out there called Fox Telem, and you can aim it at the satellite, set the frequency up correctly, and get telemetry information from the satellite, which of course will have voltages and temperatures and health of the satellite and so forth. And I believe this program forwards that information to AMSAT so that they can keep track of the health of the satellites. Another satellite program which I was using quite a bit back then is called gPredict. I rather like this one. It draws a nice map. It shows you the footprint of the satellite. It will show you, when the next satellite pass is going to be for a given satellite. You can update the map to show the path over the Earth of where the satellite is going. You can download the TLE file, which is the updated orbital information for the satellites. And it also has an interface to antenna rotator controllers. And when I built my satellite antenna, I used a very simple interface with an Arduino and a couple of motors. And I built my own rotator controller that the whole thing sits on top of a camera tripod. And it works quite nicely. The only trouble is when the antenna goes from one side to the other, your cable gets wrapped around the tripod. Haven't quite figured out how to solve that yet, except with a longer cable. But it all works, and I know people. One gentleman I know in town recently got worked all states via satellite. And that's not easy to do from Massachusetts. I don't know how he got Hawaii, but he did. Okay, software-defined radio is something that a lot of people play with. You can buy one of those little dongles for 25 or 30 bucks, plug it into USB, and dip your toe into the experience. There's some much more sophisticated hardware out there for people who are quite serious about this. And there's a piece of software that can be used to help with software-defined radio or any signal processing application. It's called GNU Radio Companion. It's all free and open source, just like everything on here. It quite literally allows you to draw a block diagram of your signal processing application. And after you've drawn the diagram correctly and set all the parameters for each block, the tool will write some Python code for you, and then it will execute it. And so you'll get to, one of the things I modeled in here was an FM radio. So I plugged in my $25 dongle, hooked it up to an antenna, found something online and copied it for an FM radio. And next thing I know, the blocks are there. I hit the go button and I had FM sound coming out of the speaker of the laptop. And so that just gives you a brief taste of what the software is capable of doing. And as I said, there's a lot of sophisticated hardware out there, HackRF and many other devices, and this supports them. And there are a lot of tutorials online. With any sophisticated piece of software, it takes a while to learn all of its capabilities, and this has many. So this is a picture of a very simple block diagram. You can quite literally see, each block has a name. The arrow shows which way the data flows, and from that you can get something that functions. So you'll see, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but on the left it says RTLSDR. That's the block that represents your USB dongle that you've plugged in. And on the right, I believe it says audio sync. Yes, it does. It says audio sync, and that allows you to hear the sound on your laptop speakers. So this is a quick application that I slapped together with GNU Radio Companion, and it's an FM radio receiver, and I have a drop-down menu for 3 or 4 local stations, and you can see there's the waterfall display where the audio is in the middle with bright red, and you can see the solid rectangular bands on either side, which is the digital information. So if you have an appropriate radio, you can see where they put advertising and the name of the song and the artist and all that sort of thing. That's what that looks like on a waterfall. And then, of course, the lower display showing you the station itself. This is another software-defined radio program called GQRX. It's a bit simpler, but same thing. You hook up your SDR dongle, you fire up the software, you tell it what frequency, what mode, bandwidth, and so forth. And you may recognize this as the NOAA weather radio frequency, or one of them. There are several, and with that, I was able to get get weather reports over the air. So this is a program that I have not played with much. This is called SDR Angel, and it takes a lot to build it and provide it to you, but I did that. It looked fairly sophisticated, and so I put it on there. Another reason that I put it on there is it's one of the few programs I have found that supports M17. And M17 is a project that is using codec 2 on the 2-meter band. And so I think I have a slide coming up about that one. Okay, under what's new and cool. So FreeDV, the free digital voice software, was invented by an amateur radio operator in Australia named David Rowe, and his PhD thesis is considered the prior art for this work. So nobody's challenged it from a patent standpoint or a copyright standpoint yet. And what he did is he created digital voice, and largely it's used on the 20-meter band. It was designed to work on HF. It was designed to understand, fading and static and all those sorts of things. And it was designed to degrade gracefully. Many digital modes will, it'll work beautifully, and then boom, you go off a cliff and it doesn't work at all. If you have an HD TV, you'll notice that. You don't get the static knowing, oh, my antenna's almost aimed in the right place. You don't get that. So, David did this work. Codec 2 is just that. It's the coder encoder. So it takes your voice, it digitizes it, your radio transmits it at the other end. The radio grabs it, the software decodes the ones and zeros into a voice, and then you can hear it. And the M17 project took that, and they took the low-level codec 2 protocols, and they're trying to, I believe the way to explain it is they're trying to recreate the kinds of devices that already exist in the D-Star world, except using M17. So if you Google it, it's tricky because you'll find a military weapon. You won't find this software. So I put the link on there for you, m17project.org. And one of the things that they have available is you can modify a TYT MD380, which is a DMR handheld. And you can modify it, or as I would say, you could liberate it so that it's not running DMR anymore, it's running the M17 protocol. So if you and your buddy have one of those, you can use this M17 protocol and do digital voice on 2 meters. Maybe 440 also, because I believe this radio does both. And so to help out the M17 project, I've put some of their software on Andy's Ham Radio Linux to expose you to it, and maybe you'll be interested in that aspect of the hobby. So here's the cool thing that I have not yet announced publicly. I saved this for Hamvention. Up to now, for the last, 10 or 12 years that Andy's Ham Radio Linux has existed, it's worked on your standard PC, laptop. For a long time, I supported 32-bit. 64-bit machines became popular. I supported both. And then I noticed that the 32-bit downloads were only about 10% of the overall download count. So I stopped supporting the 32-bit, but the last version I created is still available for download. So everything's 64-bit now. But for the longest time, people said to me, Andy, why can't we have this on Raspberry Pi? Well, part of it was because I just didn't have the cycles to do it. And part of it, honestly, I don't think that earlier versions of Raspberry Pi had enough compute horsepower and memory to do this. But I stand here willing to be proved wrong on that. I recently purchased a Raspberry Pi 5, and I think it does have enough memory and enough compute power to make this work. So what I did was I tried to handcraft Andy's Ham Radio Linux on the Raspberry Pi and then gzip it and compress it and distribute it. That ended up being about 6 gigabytes. And I said, no, that's too big. I don't like that. So what I did, instead of using New England hand craftsmanship, I decided to write a big program, which was a little over 2,000 lines long, to do all of the installation for you. So if you start with Raspberry Pi OS, 5. What are they up to? 5.2 nowadays. If you start with that and run my script, it will do all of the installation work for you. I supplied a few source tarballs to make it easier, but I could put wget in there just as well. So the idea is the download of that is only 200 or 300 megabytes as opposed to multiple gigabytes. And I have it working on the Raspberry Pi OS 5.1 or 2. Friends of mine have tested it on Raspberry Pi 4 or 5. I tried it on a 2B, that's a 32-bit version, and it seems to install, but I haven't hooked it up to a radio yet to see how well it behaves. Now, other configurations might work. I have functions in there that check for supported configurations. But if you try it, comment out those functions and tell me where it works. And if this works the way I think it should, when, Ubuntu 24.04 is already out, there's no reason that I can think of why this script shouldn't work on any Ubuntu-based Linux distribution, of which there are many. So the cool thing that I like about this is it's not limited to Xubuntu. It could open up a whole world of different Linux distributions on which this software could work. And so I'm looking forward to that. And it also serves as documentation. A lot of times when I handcraft it, I forget what I did last year to make something work. Now it's documented, and if somebody wants to take that and make a better version of Ham Radio Linux, I say go for it. That's what free and open source software is about. So there's a quick screenshot of Andy's Ham Radio Linux running on a Raspberry Pi 5. It's real, it works, and this was only in the last couple, 3 weeks that I got it to work, so I haven't yet had a chance to try it with my radio, but I believe a Pi 5 probably has enough compute horsepower to do it. It certainly has enough memory to do it, and so I'm eager to give it a try. How many people have played with Raspberry Pis in one flavor or another? Many of you. Okay, so this might be a vehicle for you to try it out, try out Linux, and see how it works with your radio. Okay, so here's where I want to thank the user community. There has been a huge amount of support from the user community in terms of downloads, and version 25, which has been out for about a year now with various updates, has got something on the order of 18,000 downloads. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. And over the years, it took a while to gain traction. The Raspberry Pi version has not gained traction yet, mostly because I didn't tell anybody about it. So I'm hoping to see some downloads there. And I was very pleased a couple of years ago to get an award from SourceForge. We hit 100,000 downloads. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Now, I'm not sure if that's that many hams across the world downloading it, or if some of you have really bad internet connections and you're persistent. But either way, I thank you. Okay, so the link on SourceForge is just that, www.sourceforge.net, or sfsierrafoxtrot.net also works. Search for my call sign, KB10IQ, or you can search for Andy Ham Radio Linux and you'll find it. If you're looking for the Raspberry Pi version, you have to click down a few levels in the Raspberry Pi directory to find it. If you're looking for the version for a regular PC or laptop, it's right there tied to the download button, and you'll see it. Other programs I talked about that are out there, which I've written and made available to you. Related videos, I've done quite a few talks for ham radio clubs via Zoom or other video conferencing software. A gentleman named Kevin, the old tech guy, did a complete and totally fair review of Andy's Ham Radio Linux. It's available on YouTube. Good, bad, warts, everything. He found it, he showed it, and that'll give you an idea of what your experience might be like. If you also go to Hackaday, the Hackaday website has something called Floss Weekly, free Libre open source software, and I very recently did a podcast with them, and so that's available as well. Okay, this is my last slide. I want to thank you again for coming to my talk. This is my second Hamvention, my second talk, and I very much enjoyed it. We may have a couple of minutes for questions.